Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Voice of America, the official podcast of the People's National Party. I'm your host, Owen, and on today's episode, we will be discussing the failures of the two-party system here in America, how the Republicans and Democrats year after year throw away your vote in favor of the mega corporations and the donor class's influence, and why the People's National Party is the best alternative to restoring America to its former glory. So let's just get straight into the facts. And the facts are that over 60% of the people of America are not satisfied with the two-party system that we have. They are not satisfied with the Republicans and Democrats and the track that the two parties are going down. They do not like the way the country is headed under their leadership, and it just goes hand in hand with the dissatisfaction rates regarding the federal government in general, whether it be the legislative branch, the executive branch, or even the judicial branch. And that's interesting because over the years, people have had a fair amount of faith in the judicial branch compared to the other two branches, because the other two were more political, and the judicial branch was more about the law and the Constitution and preserving rights and freedoms and all this stuff. But even that's declining. So it really leads you to question, what is it? What is it over the years that has made people lose faith and interest in the two-party system and thus ultimately politics in general? Well, that's the question that we're attempting to answer here in this podcast. So when you are trying to find out the root of the causes of why people don't like the current system, it's important to look at the major factors that people really look at affecting people's lives on a daily basis. A lot of people are motivated and influenced by social issues because, that can get more like emotional. But for the most part, economic issues are really important to a lot of people. And the most important economic issues to people are the GDP, the national debt, the inflation rate, and the unemployment for the most part. And that's what people look at. And they study that as much as they can for the average American. That by studying, I mean looking at the numbers every once in a while and seeing where we are. And they tend to judge their economic views off of those simple things. But here's the problem. Nothing's changing. Nothing is significantly changing that's like convincing people to be like, oh, yes, I need to vote for this person because they have made, significant economic change. If you look at some of these charts, for example, the national debt under each president dating back to Jimmy Carter. The national debt has increased under every single president, Republican and Democrat, at a very significant rate. Clinton got pretty close to decreasing it quite a bit in his second term in office, but he still ultimately had a net increase. And under the Reagan administration, obviously the national debt blew up. Obama, in his first term, the national debt blew up. Trump now, just because of COVID mostly. The point is that it's not really changing a whole lot, and people are getting a little bit concerned about that. If you move on to the inflation rate, we all know that inflation has been continuously rising over the years as the 2000s progress, really. And there's no significant change happening, not under Trump or nothing that we've seen from Biden. Biden's only made it worse. Obama, nothing significant happened. Bush, you can go all the way back. Nothing's really changing when it comes to inflation, and people are getting really concerned and they want some alternatives. Then you look at unemployment. Now, unemployment is interesting because although it may be true that a lot of Republicans would have the unemployment rate reach record lows for whatever time that they were president for, what would end up happening is that by the end of their term, the unemployment rate would rise up again, and it would be the Democrats who had to push it back down. So, for example, after the Reagan administration, Reagan did push the unemployment rate fairly low to a significant amount. It was a little bit above 4%, the unemployment rate in America. But in his last year or two, it jumped back up to almost 8%. And it was Bill Clinton who had to start bringing the unemployment rate down by adding more jobs to the economy. Now, obviously, things like the Great Recession in 2008 clearly affected how George W. Bush and Obama and their numbers in regards to unemployment. But when you compare it all, ultimately, you'll find that Again, no significant change. And then finally, if you look at America's GDP over the years, no significant change. Nothing, mind-boggling, amazing that's like, wow, this guy has really, really invested his time and energy into making the American economy like the best in the world. Nothing's changed over the past few decades for the most part. And I mean, it doesn't look like it's going anywhere anytime soon. And people are looking at these things, looking at these numbers, and they're realizing that nothing is changing and that we need alternatives. So several people come up with alternatives. Several people decide, you know what, I'm going to make a political party. I'm going to run for president. I'm going to make change in this country. Well, the only problem is that that's not really how it's going to work. That's not how it works. It's very difficult for any third party to get any representation whatsoever at all, or name recognition or anything. And if you think you can just jump into the ring and run for president right off the bat, you're not going to get anywhere. And even if you do get a few thousand votes, or even 1 million, like the Libertarians, for example, you're not going anywhere. You're just going to be stopped. Partially because the Republicans and Democrats work together in many ways to prevent third parties from having access to ballots and having access to TV and airtime, having access to the debate stage. I mean, it's a huge deal, and a lot of third parties feel like they're being cheated out of this and they're not getting a real chance to express their views. If you look at, like I said earlier, the studies, that 40% of Americans roughly want a third option, that clearly signifies something. And that 60% are dissatisfied with the current system, with the two parties, speaks even more volumes. So people took action, as I said. There were a couple big names that showed up over the years that tried to influence elections in one way or another, like Ross Perot in 1992, who, I mean, he was extremely wealthy and he used his wealth to come in as an independent. Then you had George Wallace, who tried to interfere with the election in the 70s between Humphrey and Nixon, tried to get it so that neither would get the Electoral College majority needed. And they did get fairly close in regards to affecting those elections in one way or another. But ultimately, they never really had any opportunity to actually win. And so many young folks especially get all worked up in this idea that they're going to create a political movement. They're going to create a revolution of some kind. And they're going to take over the government, figuratively speaking, I guess, and win the day and save everybody. And that's really not how it works out. However, we can make change. We can make reform. We can better the lives of the American people, whether we have political influence or not. Right now, however, the People's National Party is trying to attack from a different perspective. Instead of jumping into the ring and putting up a presidential candidate as soon as we can, we're going to start at the grassroots level. We're going to get the name recognition that so many parties lack when they first enter the world of politics. We're going to run for local office, city council member seats, mayoral elections, move it up to state legislature, and then statewide elections eventually with maybe a governor's race or something. You start from the bottom and you work your way up. That's how things are supposed to be. But many people don't think that way, which is the problem, which is why the two-party system has been able to hold a monopoly over this country. Republicans and Democrats have their disagreements, but at the end of the day, they're one and the same. And I say it's true because it is true. I mean, I'm hoping that a lot of Americans are starting to wake up to this reality that we're living in. and that is that the Republicans and Democrats, although they may disagree on policy, are exactly the same since they are both bought and in the pockets of the mega corporations, the donor class, the labor unions, and the wealthy in general, the political elite. And the conservative and liberal establishment have so much wealth and so much power over the years from promising the American people things and never following through, never making change, never doing anything to benefit the common good of this country or the people. They've just made the rich richer, the poor poorer, and all in the meantime, they've lined their own pockets with several bags of cash. Now, this is why you must start at the grassroots level. Every good political movement starts at the grassroots level. It doesn't start at the top. Because the people are the driving force of any social change and social reform. I don't care if you're a progressive, a conservative, whatever. No matter what political movement you want to start, it starts at the bottom. It doesn't start at the top, which is why you can't run for president immediately. You have to start locally. You have to start with the fundraising and the activism and the protests and the everything that goes along with it, and get that name recognition at the local level and slowly work your way up. Now, a lot of people might be thinking, well, this is great, but how is the People's National Party actually going to make change once they are in power? Because what if we're just like everyone else? What if we just have empty promises and do nothing once we get to the top? Well, that's what we're here to more clearly explain, hopefully. So for economic policies, we're going to start with actually benefiting the American people again, not the mega corporations, not the leadership in the labor unions, who, let's be honest, don't really care about the people that are actually in the unions, or the wealthy or the elite, anybody like that. We're not going to be sucking it up to them like the Democrats and the Republicans do every year. We're going to destroy the servile state, which is where big government and big business conspire in our supposedly glorious mixed economy system of government, where the big government and the big business conspire to exploit the working man, which is wrong. We know that's wrong. And we also know it's the reality, unfortunately, because no matter who's in power, the Democrats or the Republicans, they're always bailing out and subsidizing the private sector, especially the big banks and other big corporations that have been exploiting people for centuries now. And that's really the forefront of the problem. And moving on from that, we also have to reform the social values of this nation. I talked much more extensively about this in one of the last episodes I did regarding the degradation of our culture and our society. But it's really true. I mean, if you think about capitalism, you always have to be thinking, if you are a capitalist, you always have to be thinking about what sells. And right now, what sells is being woke. So when Coca-Cola posts Black Lives Matter, or when Nike turns their Nike symbol into a pride flag or whatever, that's a selling point. That doesn't mean the people in the leadership roles of Nike or Coke actually believe that. It just means they know, thanks to their marketing strategists that they pay a bunch of money to go and survey people, they know that in our modern society, those are two really big things that are political and can make a lot of money. And so they'll make those little changes and tweaks here and there to their company to ultimately make more money, because that's really what this world has come to. It's about making money. It's about destroying your competitors, and really just it's miserable. It really is miserable, because we all know that there's so much more to life than money and power, but nobody seems to understand that in this demonic satanic society that we live in, called modern culture, I guess. I don't know. It's horrible. But the point is that it starts from the bottom, right? Here at the PNP, we are going to start from the bottom. We're going to get involved in the local communities that need the help the most. That way, by the time we are at the top, we have the name recognition, we have the influence, we have the power to actually follow through with the change. We're going to make real economic and social change that actually help the American people, not put them deeper and deeper into economic poverty and decline. You know, ultimately, that's what it's about. It's about doing things. The government doesn't do anything for the people. Here at the People's National Party, all we can think about is actually doing things. All we want to do is actually to make change, to make reform. That is our number one goal and priority. We want to invest the time and energy and effort into making this nation the great beacon of prosperity that we know it can be. But it is going nowhere under the Republicans and Democrats. It is going nowhere under the mixed economic system that we have. It's definitely not going to go anywhere under straight up capitalism or socialism. We need third way alternatives. We need options. The American people need options, especially the working class, who have been confined to this idea and thought that there's only two options, there's only two ways. And the more you side with one, the farther away you can get from bridging the differences you have with the other, and the more divided we get, which is another super important issue. Many people are afraid that America could get into a second civil war. We could get so divided among political beliefs that we ultimately end up separating, and there actually becomes real physical conflict between the people. And we don't want that. We want to preserve the Union because that is the number one priority. America is by far the greatest nation ever in world history. It is the greatest example of prosperity, freedom, and creativity. It really is. And with the greatness of Western culture and civilization, it has only grown to be even better. And the more we take these things away, the more we ruin our society, the more we run away from tradition, the more we run away from basic core common values and beliefs, the more we destroy our culture and our civilization, the less we will be able, the less of a chance we will have to fix it in the end. So here at the PNP, it's about restoring America. It's about bringing back the glory that it once was and making it work for the people. The people, once again. Thank you so much, everyone, for sticking around to the end of this episode. We really appreciate it, and would also highly suggest for you to follow or subscribe to stay up to date with the podcast so you never miss a new episode, and you can always listen to our great content that we come out with each week. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, complaints about the podcast or the party or whatever, always feel free to reach out to us, and through social media, email. If you would like a more detailed explanation of our actual party platform, the policies that will be in place, how society would be structured, you can always go to our website, which is linked in the bio of this podcast. And until then, I'll talk to you next week, folks. God bless.